I went in 1 millisecond from the worst I ever felt in my life to the best. I can't remember feeling the kind of love I instantly felt, even as a child. It was love, and it was joy, very joyful. I'm not afraid no more. I stopped.
Welcome to Cajun Miracles. I have a special guest and good friend with it today, Louis Saia. Welcome, Louis, to Cajun Miracles.
Hey, good afternoon, Rock.
So, Lou, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in New Orleans, raised Catholic. My grandparents, immigrants from Sicily, and founded Saia Motor Freight Line, the trucking company so well known in Houma and today throughout the country. But in New Orleans, I went to Catholic schools and was a cradle Catholic. But I was also grew up in the large Italian population in New Orleans, and my father was operating Saia Motor Freight's New Orleans operation. So, what I really want to share today with the audience is about Our Lady. The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to me in 1996. And so to get there, I want to give a little background. I got to tell you, I love the name of your show, Cajun Miracles, because I hit a lot of miracles, all starting with the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So I start now by saying, growing up, I was working at the family trucking company for quite some time. My dad was not in the mafia, as many people might say, but he was associates with all the Italian capos, bosses of organized crime in New Orleans. Associate, not a member. And I can tell you, I grew up with the sons of my father's friends. They were mostly Italians. We were a tough bunch, but a good group of friends, good group of guys. So I started working as a young teenager at the trucking firm, unloading trucks and loading trucks. Worked through high school. In college, I worked the port, the New Orleans wharves, where the ships come to berth to unload cargo. New Orleans is really big with coffee beans. A lot of coffee beans came in. So I'd go solicit the cargo from these ships to further transport by truck. I ended up going to Loyola University to get a business degree, a bachelor's degree in business administration. And from there, I, after graduating, moved to Houma, Louisiana, to take on the vice president of operations job at Saia. During that time, I had what I call just a revelation. I was taking a shower one day, and I felt a strange feeling. Something come over me. It was an idea on how to solve a big problem in trucking. And The problem was this, trying to make it short, is that you can ship on trucks dry goods like automobile tires or tractor tires or nuts and bolts or cans of paint or appliances like dishwashers and washing machines or dryers, or there's 25,000 dry good commodities. But when it comes to shipping a perishable product, like what we have in the South Louisiana area, fish or oysters or crab or beef.
Even ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, everything from ice cream, frozen pizza, you name it. But in particular on the fresh perishables, there's a short shelf life. While you can ship dry commodities, the 25,000 dry goods, you can call every day, have a truck pick it up, be guaranteed an overnight delivery. With perishables, you can't call every day. In New Orleans at the time, they could only make a pickup once a week. So let's take fish. If you catch fish today and you want to ship it, and let's say today is Monday, but the truck only picks up on Friday, you've lost almost all of the shelf life on the fish before it even ships. Refrigerated trucks are good, but they're good when you got a whole truckload. But for small shipments, you got to wait for that truck that picks up small shipments, and it only comes once a week. The revelation I had was that if you could use the infrastructure of hot trucks, like the trucks that my family owned and operated, you could get everyday pickups. You could get overnight guaranteed service on perishables. The problem is those trucks are hot. So the idea was to create or invent a shipping container that had a pallet footprint where a forklift could pick it up. That did not require any kind of plug-in, because there's no plug-ins on these trailers and on the docks that freight moves across. So you'd have to have a self-contained, refrigerated shipping container that could hold at least 1,500 pounds of product that would be computer driven in as far as accuracy of temperature, to where you could get an accurate temperature of plus or minus 1 degree. They could go super cold for commodities like ice cream to minus 20 at least. And that can be put on a forklift. It's self-contained, doesn't run on gas or diesel, doesn't require electrical plug, that could be moved around, loaded onto a truck, and maintain an accurate temperature to go from the origin point to the destination point, which could be overnight. But in the worst case scenario in the United States, it'd be maybe 3 days. For instance, to go from Miami to Seattle could take as long as 4 days. I began to try to create this container and use it to bring about a new service that would solve a lot of problems, in particular for the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And spent countless hours working with welders in Homer, Louisiana, and built a container. First, it was welded out of aluminum. And I decided on a refrigeration system that used compressed liquid carbon dioxide or nitrogen to achieve cold temperatures. I used a small computer to signal one moving part, a valve, a solenoid valve, to meter in the refrigerant until it hit set point temperature, and then turn it off, and then meter it back and turn it off, keeping temperature within, in the beginning it was plus or minus a couple of degrees. Once I had tested it, I built about 200. And I knew of a big need in Mississippi. Mississippi had converted all its cotton to catfish, and they were having difficulty shipping small shipments of catfish, fresh fish. So, went up to the catfish delta, I call it. It's the delta area of Mississippi. Introduced it to the catfish companies there and the catfish farmers. It was a big success. From there, I started hauling other commodities besides catfish. Everything from products that Kraft makes or Sara Lee makes. All the big food companies began to use it. And then it got to a point to where I wanted to grow it outside of my family's trucking company, its service area. And so I wanted to make it go nationwide. I hired a New York attorney who specialized in licensing of patents. I ended up with 7 patents. And he found a large company called Grumman. For those of you who haven't heard of Grumman, they built Apollo. They put the first man on the moon. They built tail hookers, for the aircraft carriers, jet fighters.
Is it called Northrop Grumman or just Grumman?
Today it is Northrop Grumman. You're correct.
Northrop. Okay.
Sometime after I went into a joint venture with Grumman, Northrop acquired Grumman, and then it became Northrop Grumman. Yeah. Of course, Northrop builds the B-2 stealth bomber. Mm-hmm. They seeded in $26 million to grow my invention nationwide in a 50-50 joint venture initially between my company and Grumman. Grumman also built mail trucks. This mail trucks you see today, delivering your mail. The little white trucks with the steering wheel on the right side. And they decided to build my product at the plant, at the very same facility in Pennsylvania that builds the mail trucks. And so we went through all of this. And then I was in charge of the sales and marketing and finding truckers beyond my family's trucking company to haul the shipping containers with the various types of temperature-sensitive commodities. It went really well, very successful. And then I went out to the West Coast, met with a big nationwide trucking company that did the same kind of trucking my family's company did, called Conway. Conway began, I had convinced them that this was a whole new frontier for new revenue for new freight. And they featured it in their public company, and they featured it in their annual report that year. And before you know it, we were doing $20 million annually hauling perishables in the shipping container, which, by the way, I named pallet because it had the pallet footprint, reefer because in trucking, reefer is slang for refrigerated. And Conway was doing $20 million a year solely in this new market. They came to me and they said, we think it's going to grow at least 5 times what we got it right now. And we don't know, maybe much more.
Who came to you?
Conway.
Okay.
We need to make a big order. How many you think? They tell me 5,000 to 8,000 units. So now we're looking at an order. There's going to be somewhere between $30 and $50 million to one customer.
Wow.
Grumman, at this point, had been bought by Northrop, as you inquired about earlier. Mm-hmm. So now they're called Northrop Grumman, one of the country's biggest defense contractors, one of the biggest defense contractors in the world. And they got so excited. And for them to get excited, it's amazing because, nothing excites. They're building aircraft that cost hundreds of millions for one copy. So for them to get excited,
big deal.
Yeah, you got to be talking hundreds of millions, or you just don't get to the watering trough with those guys. They wanted to go meet the trucking company that I had just procured this big order from on the West Coast. I met him out in Palo Alto, California, flew into San Francisco, met him at the corporate office of the trucking company. Great meeting. The only complaint they had was that I hope you guys can build them fast enough and you can build enough of them. We also discussed a few things we needed to tweak, which is normal. And so I was so happy. Rick, I was so happy. I call him Rock. I've been knowing Rick for a long time, but Rock, I was so happy. We had a nice meal in an Italian restaurant, and we were getting ready to head back to the airport. They were in their car, and I was in my car. And so I walk up to tell them goodbye, and it was the new executive that Northrop had appointed to our joint venture. I said, guys, how did y'all like the meeting? And they tell me, we liked everything but one thing. I said, what didn't you like? They said, we don't like owning half of the joint venture. We think we need to buy you out. We need to own 100%. Because we're not like Grumman. We're Northrop. Grumman does 50% joint ventures, but Northrop owns everything or nothing. I said, guys, and we're just getting started. It looks so good. Just on this one order, our profits should exceed $20 million. I said, what are y'all thinking about offering to buy me out? And they said, $2 million. I said to myself, it doesn't seem right. The arithmetic is just, it's the math isn't there. Well, are y'all joking with me? And the new guy appointed as my counterpart from Northrop tells me, with a finger pointed in my face. He's sitting in his car, I'm standing outside, and he looks at me and he says, "You really need to think about taking $2 million for your half. Because if you don't, when we're through with you, you'll be broke." Oh, shocking. I get to the airport, get in a plane, and while I'm getting ready to board, I call my wife. I said, "Cindy, it's a great meeting, but I had a terrible experience after." And I told her what happened. I said, "They like it so much, they want our half. It's greed." And back then, I didn't realize, I didn't know what anxiety really was. I mean, I hadn't had anxiety much in my life. I had a terrible case of anxiety on the way back. I didn't know the solution is to pull out the rosary and pray the rosary. And just dealt with that anxiety until I got home. And when we got home, I discussed it, and my wife and I both agreed. We worked too hard for so many years to make this a success. And by the way, my wife was an engineer she had worked for industrial gas companies. She's an engineer from Northwestern University. And she was a big contributor in the improvements to the technology that we had made with regards to this shipping container. We both agreed, no, we can't let them bully us. We're just going to have to fight. Well, we didn't know what we were getting into. It wasn't long, and we found out how they would break us. They fired everybody in the company. I had sales and marketing responsibility in Homer, Louisiana, and I was chairman of the board and owned half the company. Well, they fired all my employees, and they fired me. You see, they did the accounting in New York, where Grumman was. I had agreed. They had a big accounting operation in New York, and I had agreed in the beginning that they could do the accounting. So they were receiving all of the funds, all of the sales receipts went to Grumman, New York. And we were doing sales and marketing. And my wife was assisting with manufacturing. But they fired everybody. They visited Conway, and they told the trucking company, the big customer, the biggest one. We had many customers, hundreds, but this was the big one. And they said, "Look, we're going to quit manufacturing for a while. We got a problem with our partner. But when he's gone, we'll make you a better deal." And so the next thing you know, I was funding the entire payroll for the company out of my pocket. And I had some money, I had.
And you wasn't getting those units were still working, huh? Or
they were still working.
But you wasn't getting none of that money.
No, all the money was being sent to my partner in New York.
And they were keeping it.
And they would not. They were keeping the money. They wouldn't build more units. Mm-hmm. But the units we had built about 2,500. And they were keeping the money, and I was funding the company. And it doesn't take long to go broke. These big corporations, well, I'll give you an idea. In-house attorneys, they had between 300 and 400.
Good grief. 300 and 400 attorneys in-house.
Yes.
That's a big company.
Very big. And I loved the CEO. I got to know him. He was Italian like myself. He was a Catholic. He was a good guy. He's very humble. He was no doubt making hundreds of millions a year as the top man. He spoke about 6 different languages. He was a Navy jet pilot. So he had Grumman invented Gulfstream aircraft for corporate. It's the premier aircraft for corporate travel. Grumman invented that company, and the first G1 was his plane that he used. They had restored it, and it was sentimental to him, and it was a fine aircraft. And he'd do a crossword puzzle on it, and then he'd tell a pilot, take a break, and he'd fly it. Very impressive guy, but humble. And I really respected him. Of all the business people I've met in my life, I respected him more than any of them. He wouldn't say, pick up the phone and tell the secretary, we need coffee. He'd get up and go make the coffee and serve it. He'd serve it himself.
Well, he was calling the shots?
And he was top guy.
But he was calling the shots with you?
Well, before Northrop came in.
Oh, before. Okay, I get it.
Well, I met the Northrop CEO who took over. In Lake Charles, Louisiana, they were building J-Star aircraft. That's an aircraft that flies very, very high, and it's reconnaissance. It can read the license plate on a car.
Right.
Well, I had met him at that plant. He wanted to meet me, so I went out to Lake Charles. The moment I met him, it was like meeting the devil. He had 10 people in his entourage just to cater to him, to open his door, to put gas in his car, to make the coffee, to do anything he needed. Opposite.
Fully opposite. Gotcha.
Now he's in charge. And he appointed a guy who I was shocked by in that parking lot after that meeting. We're going to fight them, but they broke us. I'm funding the company. They taking all the money. Got really, really bad. I'm walking around at night. I couldn't sleep. I was Catholic, but I was in the business, to be honest. Jesus was not yet the center of my life. So I was pacing around my kitchen, wondering how I'm going broke. My family's being hurt. My employers are being hurt. And they're doing what they told me they'd do. They're going to break me. And so the devil starts putting thoughts in your mind like, if your son went to war, let's say the Gulf War, because this is around that time. This is back in the mid to late 90s. And he kills someone. You'd say, son, you were fighting to stop oppression, for human rights. You were fighting evil. It's okay. There is a time to kill. Devil had me convinced they're evil. They're hurting my family and the people closest to me, my employees. I need to kill these guys. And remember my upbringing, Sicilian, New Orleans. Being around guys that were pretty bad, made men. So I felt like it was my time to take justice in my own hands. So I planned a trip to where this guy lived. He lived in Los Angeles. There was 2 of them. And I regret it, but I got to tell you, I decided I was going to kill them both. Had their addresses, knew where they lived. Was going to drive out there on cash. Was going to certainly look. They didn't have as many cameras. They had some. Was going to certainly look to fuel up where there was no cameras. And I had an alibi. A friend of mine was going to vouch that I was in his yacht, his $2 million yacht, fishing for 4 or 5 days in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of my wife tell her I'm going fishing. Well, I'm supposed to leave on Monday. My suitcase is packed, which included weapons. It's Sunday, and my wife says, "You look so stressed. Please come to church." I think to myself, she'd be stressed too if she had to go kill 2 guys tomorrow. I'd never killed anybody. I said, "Woman, look at the island in the kitchen. I done walked around it so much that the wood is wearing off the floor, the varnish." I said, "Go to church and pray for me," which she did. But when she left, I got an anxiety attack with the thought of the job I had in Los Angeles that was so severe that it was a panic attack. It was claustrophobia. I felt like the walls were coming in. Well, I had been to the doctor months before during this battle. I had been telling him about my anxiety. He gave me Valium. He said, "Take one of these, it'll make it go away." He didn't give me the rosary. He gave me Valium. I run to the bathroom, grab the bottle. It's empty. I said, "What am I going to do?" And the only thing I could think of was, maybe if I go outside and jog. I hadn't run or jogged since high school football, 20-something years before. Put on tennis shoes, go out the house. But while I'm tying those tennis shoes, I did one important thing. I prayed a Hail Mary, one Hail Mary. And I begged Mary, I said, "Mary, please help me. Get outside and start jogging." Well, I get a quarter mile down the road. The road turns left, and it's going to pass the office where I had this joint venture business going on. It was a sales and marketing office. And I saw a woman young girl on a porch from a distance. And I said, "That must be my secretary. How good. She's not even getting paid anymore, and she's still here on a Sunday working, trying to help." But when I got close, I looked to wave to her. And I saw a young girl, about 14 in age, dressed like the movie The Passion, with a white veil, white gown, like they dressed 2,000 years ago in Jesus' times. And she had her hands like this. And she was looking straight out. And I was approaching from the road past like this. And I saw that. And I thought, I got enough problems. I got to get out of here. Scared the daylights out of me. I start running as fast as I can, right to get away. But right when I'm directly in front of her, I look at her one more time. This time, our eyes connected. I went in 1 millisecond from the worst I ever felt in my life to the best. I can't remember feeling the kind of love I instantly felt, even as a child. It was love, and it was joy, very joyful. I'm not afraid no more. I stop. I'm about 12 foot. She's standing on a raised porch that goes into the office. But she's on the edge of the porch looking at me, and I'm looking at her. but I can smell the most beautiful smell that I'd ever smelt in my life. Never smelt it before. Such a fragrance. I came to learn later that a lot of Catholics call it the smell of roses or the smell of sanctity. I could smell it so strong that I could taste it in my saliva. And she's still like this. And I'm looking at her. And I think, who is she? What is she doing? I didn't think it was the Blessed Virgin Mary. She only looked 14 years old. About 5'2", because I remember where her head went up on that column that supported the roof of the porch. About 5'2". Her eyes were beautiful blue. Her skin was as white like a baby, you know, beautiful. She weighed about, I'd guess, 105 pounds. Brown hair. Sun was out the veil, and I could see it with a breeze. It was kind of moving a little bit. And I'm looking at her, and I think, who is she? What is she doing? I didn't say it. I thought it. Who is she? What is she doing? Without me saying it, she responds to me with a beautiful voice. I'm praying to protect you. And she says, just have faith in my son, Jesus. It's Mary. And I got this tremendous feeling of this love. And it was almost euphoric. It was like ecstasy. And I feel like a magnet pulling me. So I'll walk straight to her. And then, when I get to her, she's on that porch, so she's higher than me. I lean in and reach to her hand, which is like this. I wanted to hold her hand, but before I could touch her, when I got closer, I could see right through her. She became translucent.
Mm.
I've thought a lot about it. Maybe it's the glorified state of a body. But I back up. She looked as human. Let's call it superhuman. She looked ordinary, like human, like flesh. See a single eyebrow, eyelash, or hair. Perfectly human, but close enough. I see translucency. It scared me. Instinctively, because I'm not thinking, I'm just doing. My body is just operating on instinct. I kneel down, close my eyes, and say one Hail Mary, and then I open them and she's gone. I look all over, not a trace. Well, this feeling, in a matter of seconds, dissipates. She's gone. But, man, I didn't have to jog. I didn't have anxiety. I felt the best I ever felt in my life. So I walk home. The sky looked bluer. The grass looked greener. Visual perception was more vivid and more beautiful. I just never felt better in my life. I get to my house. Well, Shortly after, my wife comes in from church. She says, I prayed for you. And she said, I asked Grandma Saia to go to Mary. She comes into the room where I'm at, and I turn around to ask her about it. And when she sees my face, she screams, what happened to you? I said, what do you mean? I was going to tell her what happened, but how do you know? What do you mean? Go look in the mirror. I go to the bathroom. I look in the mirror. My wife had known me for about 8 years. Literally. I looked 15 years younger, like a different person. All the stress she told me about, come to church, you look so stressed. I look like a different person. As a matter of fact, Rock, I knew you back then very well, and your sisters. And I remember one of your sisters telling me the same thing. Lou, she saw me shortly after this occurred, and she said, Lou, what did you do? You look so good. You look so young. I think being in the presence of the Mother of God cleansed my soul of its impurity and of its sin. And it just made, you know what I tell women today after that experience. You want to be beautiful, you don't have to go to the beauty parlor. Go to church. You put Jesus in you and let him and his light shine out. That's beauty. So, Rock, I want to give a sequence to this podcast.
Yes, we're going to do part 2 of this next episode.
But it's been a pleasure.
Great testimony, Lou. Great testimony. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.